This is the first video in our new unit on bonding, and it's on ionic bonding. But before I get to that, I want to talk about chemical bonding in general, and it is based on something called collision theory. It states that these molecules and compounds must collide with enough energy and the correct orientation to form new bonds. In this schematic, you can see here that after the collision of these molecules, we have a new chemical composition here and a new chemical structure forming as a result. I want to talk to you now about what's happening during the collision. So during the collision, as the atoms are approaching one another, they have kinetic energy, this energy of motion. As they get closer and closer, they reach a point where the electrons found in the outer shells are repelling one another. So there's a repulsive force as a result of electron-electron interactions, and there's a repulsive force as a result of the positive nuclei repelling one another as well. So during the collision, they're getting closer. Kinetic energy is converted into stored or potential energy. Now, as they get even closer, there's another interaction that occurs, and this one is an attractive interaction and not a repulsive, and that is between the electron cloud of one atom and the nucleus with its positive protons in the other atom. So all of these forces, both attractive and repulsive, are occurring at the same time. Now, once they get close enough where this attractive force begins to take over, what happens is the attractive forces overpower the repulsive forces, so they're stronger. And the two atoms form a chemical bond, which results in a more stable, lower state of energy. Let's define ionic bonds. These are electrostatic attractive forces between an anion and a cation, between a metal and a non-metal. And we've talked about these already throughout this course. You know how to write chemical reactions, you know ionic nomenclature, you understand the processes of solvation and dissolution, and you can even write a dissociation equation for an ionic compound in an aqueous environment. So let's talk about the last unit on periodicity. So ionic compounds and ionic bonds result from these differences of size, ionization energy, and electronegativity, which were all discussed in the last unit. If you look at this schematic here, it is showing an ionic bond forming between a highly electronegative species, fluorine, and a species with a relatively low electronegativity, sodium. And we've talked about this before. What is happening is as these molecules get closer, think collision theory, the sodium's electron in the outermost cloud is actually closer to the nucleus of the fluorine than it is to the nucleus of the sodium, which is amazing. They're so close, in fact, that it's considered to be a transference of electrons, where sodium transfers its electron to fluorine. Fluorine becomes an anion, and the sodium becomes a cation, and due to the Coulombic attraction between them, they come together electrostatically to form what we are calling ionic bonds. So Let's look at the periodic trends and some of the characteristics of sodium compared to fluorine. Now, would you say there's significant differences here? Because I sure would. Let's start with sodium. Electronegativity on the Pauling scale of 0.9, okay? And the electronegativity here for fluorine is the highest, relatively speaking. Remember, this is a qualitative scale and it is dimensionless. Fluorine has 4.0. Let's look at fluorine's first ionization energy. All right, this is the amount of energy required to eject one of its outermost electrons. 1680 kilojoules per mole compared to the low ionization energy for sodium at a mere 496 kilojoules per mole. Lastly, let's talk about the radius of these two. So sodium is 190 picometers, whereas the radius of fluorine is considerably smaller at 42 picometers. Now, using the difference in electronegativities, we can actually determine the types of bonds that are going to form. So in this case here, we have a change in electronegativity of 3.1 calculated by taking 4.0 and subtracting 0.9. I'm going to talk to you more about that. Please get out your Pauling scale of electronegativities. Now you've seen this scale here at the bottom, and up to this point I have not mentioned what this scale is used for. I'm going to cover that now. If the change in electronegativity is greater than 2, then a bond can be considered ionic. So, if the number is less than 2.0, you also need to consider what species are bonding. So if it's between about 1.7 and 2.0, and a metal is bonding with a nonmetal, then we will also consider that to be an ionic bond. So this scale, I should mention, is there are exceptions, but overall, if you follow these two rules, you'll be able to identify ionic bonds. The crystal lattice, this is a three-dimension symmetrical array of the ionic crystals, cations and anions. And they look like this. There's a very ordered structure to these lattice. Now, we're comparing here sodium fluoride and magnesium oxide in this case here, and the number on top is giving you that distance between the center of a cation, the center of an anion. All ionic compounds are considered solids. And one of the properties of ionic compounds is that they have high melting points. And I'm going to talk to you about why that is. I also want to talk a little bit more about Coulomb's law and the Coulombic attractions that occur within the crystal lattice structure. So as you recall, Coulomb's law is a way of relating the electrostatic force to the charges of these ions and also the distance between them, where the energy is inversely related to the distance and the energy is directly related or directly proportional to the charges. So let's take a look here at the melting points of these two ionic compounds and talk a little bit about why there is such a great difference between these two. All right, let's start with sodium fluoride. So here we have a lattice structure and we're given the distance here. Well, if we look and compare these distances and then look at Coulomb's law conceptually, we see that sodium fluoride has a greater distance between their ions. And mathematically, as this distance here goes up, the electrostatic force and therefore the energy goes down, all right? So if we're talking about the energy to break the crystal lattice structure, which would be the case in, say, looking at melting points, then that would make sense with the 996 Celsius compared to 2,825 degrees Celsius. But that's only part of the story. Now let's look at the charges between them. Okay, sodium +1, fluorine +1, okay, -1, sorry. And then magnesium, all right, now it's a group 2 metal with a positive +2 charge, and it's bonding to oxygen with a -2 charge. So the magnitude of the charge has greatly increased, and those are the cues here. And remember, I'm just looking for a conceptual understanding. So if you were to just plug in numbers here, for sodium fluoride, you'd have a +1, and then Q2 equal to a -1. But if you were to plug in numbers for magnesium oxide, then you would have a +2 and a -2. And if you were to consider the absolute value between those two, or the magnitude, you would see that magnesium oxide is 4 times the greater force when compared to sodium fluoride, okay? And then the last thing about these structures I want to talk about would be their atomic radii, okay? So sodium has a larger atomic radius when compared to magnesium. They're in the same period, however, or the same period, and therefore have that same principal quantum number. However, magnesium has 1 additional proton in its nucleus, okay? So we've talked about that extensively as well. So that is one reason why magnesium's radius is smaller than sodium's. Let's look at the anions. They're pretty much about the same. And if you look at the periodic table, fluorine does have an additional proton, okay, in the nucleus, but there's also added electron-electron repulsion, and I've made a whole video on exceptions in periodicity and electron configurations. So it's not always as simple and clear-cut as we would like it to be, because these structures result from very complex interactions. Let's look at this graph, which is showing the lattice energy in kilojoules per mole. Now it's looking at our group 1 metals and lithium, sodium, potassium. As we go down that family, we are adding clouds of electrons or energy shells or levels. So atomic radii are increasing. Now, look at the anions. They're being compared to fluoride, chloride, bromide, and iodide. And as you move down that group of halogens, you're going to see that the atomic radius again is increasing. So if we were to look at this graphically, we would expect lithium fluoride to have the greatest lattice energy. Why is that? Well, it's because they're closest together, okay? Because they're closer together, and Coulomb's law states that when they are closer together, there's that inverse relationship. Whereas distance goes down, the force and therefore the energy increases. Here are some final notes I'd like to discuss about ionic properties. All right, one, that when these are dissolved in an aqueous environment, a solution like water, the ions dissociate, and for that reason, electricity can be conducted in this solution. They are usually soluble in polar solvents, and we're going to talk a lot about that in this unit. Ionic compounds are hard, they're brittle, and they have something called cleavage, which means when they are stressed, the crystal lattice structure will basically split or cleave along certain planes. So if I took a hammer and smacked a crystal, an ionic crystal, we would expect there to be this cleavage or shearing that would occur. And once the stress occurs and the anions and cations are moved in just the right arrangement, we see in the schematic here that there's a repulsion that occurs that ultimately cleaves the solid. So this was our first podcast in a new unit dealing with bonding and chemical structure. So we're going to talk extensively about the properties here, both macroscopic and microscopic. You're going to have a series of inquiry-based labs coming up, and hopefully you'll have an idea how to develop bonding models and predict chemical formulas. I'll see you guys in class.